Welcome back to This is Thailand, where we tell the stories that don't make the travel brochures. Tonight's story comes from a man named Murray, 52 years old, from Fort McMurray, Alberta, up in the tar sands where the winter hits -40 and the money's good enough that people put up with it for decades. Murray was one of those people. 26 years on drilling crews, the last 8 of them running his own floor. He had a wife. He had 2 kids. He had a house with a heated garage and a boat he used maybe 4 times a summer. And in October of 2019, he got on a plane to Pattaya with 3 lads off his crew for 2 weeks because that's what the crew did on their time off. He came home from that holiday. But not really. Not in any way that counted. Now this one's different from a lot of the stories we tell on this channel. Murray wasn't lonely when he went. He wasn't broke. He wasn't running from anything he could name. He was a man with a full life who walked away from all of it, on purpose, with his eyes open. And what he found on the other side of that decision took him 4 years to properly understand. There's a woman in this story. There's a family in Isaan. There's a house that got built and a number that got smaller. And there's a moment at a Songkran party, 4 years down the road, where a drunk young man says one sentence across a plastic table and rearranges everything Murray thought he knew. We're not going to tell you what that sentence was. Not yet. What we will tell you is that Murray doesn't hate anybody in this story. Not her, not her family, not himself entirely, which is rarer than you'd think. And it's the reason this one's going to stick with you. Here's his story, in his own words. I started on the rigs when I was 21, 1995 roughly. My dad was a heavy-duty mechanic in Red Deer, and he told me flat out, "You don't have the patience for a trade. Go north. They'll pay you to be strong and stupid." So that's what I did. Roughneck first, then motor hand, derrick hand, all the way up. Last 8 years I was the driller, which means I ran the floor. 4 guys, my shift, my calls. If somebody got hurt on my floor, it was on me. Never lost anybody. Broke a fella's wrist once and I still think about it. The thing people don't understand about the patch is the rotation. 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off. Some outfits, it's 14 and 14. Some it's 20 and 10. Camp life. You fly into Fort Mac, they bus you out to site. You live in a trailer with a bed and a TV bolted to the wall, and you work 12-hour shifts in weather that'll freeze your eyelashes shut. Then you come home for 2 weeks and everybody's mid-conversation without you. I did that for 26 years, bud. Do the math on that. That's 13 years of my life spent somewhere else. Cheryl and me got married in '98. She was from Lacombe, worked at a dental office for a while, and then didn't once the kids came. And I want to be careful how I say this because it'd be easy for me to sit here and tell you the marriage was dead, and I was miserable, and that's why. That's not what happened. That's the story I told myself for about 18 months, and it's rubbish. The marriage wasn't dead. The marriage was fine. It was just quiet. It was 2 people who'd got very, very good at handling their own half of the operation. Cheryl ran everything. Report cards, mortgage renewal, hockey registration, the dog's vet appointments. When my mother passed in 2014, I was on shift and I couldn't get out because of weather, and Cheryl organized the whole funeral herself. Picked the casket, wrote the obituary, called my aunt in Kamloops who nobody had talked to in 11 years. I got there the day before and stood at the front of a church and everybody said, "What a nice service." And I hadn't done a single thing. And what did I do? I made money. That was my half. I was very good at my half. 26 years, and I honestly believe half the guys I worked with would tell you Murray's a good guy. Easy to get along with. Never bitched about the food, never started anything in the games room, always took the crappy shift over Christmas if a younger fella had little ones at home. In camp, that's currency. You live in a metal box with 11 other men, you learn quick that keeping things smooth is the whole job. So I kept things smooth. But here's the thing I've had 4 years to chew on. Being easy to be around and being a good man are 2 completely different things, and I had them filed under the same heading my whole adult life. Never once occurred to me to check. The kids, Kayla and Dylan. Kayla was 19 in 2019, down in Edmonton doing her 2nd year at McEwen. Smart kid, sarcastic, got that from her mother. She used to text me stuff off the internet when I was in camp. Just dumb videos, nothing. And I'd look at them at 11 at night in my bunk, and it'd be the best part of the day. Dylan was 16, played bantam, then midget. Good hands, no size. I want to say I saw a dozen of his games. Might be being generous with myself there. It was always the schedule. Games or weekends. And half my weekends I was 400 kilometers north with a phone that didn't get signal past the last camp. That's what I said anyway. And it was true. It just wasn't the whole truth, because there were plenty of home weeks where I could have gone, and instead I sat in the garage with the radio on, drinking kokanee, and doing absolutely nothing at all. That's what 45 looked like for me. Not sad. I want to be clear about that, because people hear these stories and they want the guy to be broken at the start. I wasn't broken. I was flat. There's a difference, and I don't think anybody warns you about the flat one. I had money coming in. I had a truck, a sled, a boat, a house in Timberlake with a heated garage. I had a wife I got along with and 2 kids who were basically already gone. And I'd wake up on a Tuesday of my off week at 10 in the morning with nothing to do and nobody needing me to do it. And I'd think, is this it then? Is this the whole thing? 26 years of being paid to be absent, and I'd got so good at it, I'd forgotten how to be present. Wasn't unhappy about it. That's the part that scares me now. I wasn't even unhappy. So, October 2019, Whitey, Wayne Federchuk, worked derricks with me for years. Guy's been going to Thailand since the 90s. He's organizing a trip. Him, a young fella named Corey, and Big Dave off the day crew. 2 weeks in Pattaya, flights out of Edmonton, some hotel on Second Road that Whitey books every single year. Pattaya wasn't something I discovered, understand. It was inherited. It was on the rigs before I got there. Every crew in the patch has 3 or 4 guys who go, and they come back brown and pleased with themselves, and they don't say much about it, which is its own kind of advertisement. 20 years I'd been hearing about it in the galley over breakfast. I said yes because Whitey asked, and because saying no would have meant coming up with a reason, and I didn't have one. That's it. That's the whole decision. There was no crisis, no fight, no moment. Cheryl said, have fun and don't be an idiot, and drove me to the airport. And I remember the radio was on some classic rock station, and neither of us said anything for the last 20 minutes. And it wasn't tense at all. It was comfortable. I've replayed that drive more times than any other 20 minutes of my life. The heat hits you before anything else. You come down the stairs off the plane at Suvarnabhumi, and it's like opening a dryer door. 34 degrees at 9 at night. In Fort Mac in October, you're already scraping windshields. We took a minibus down from Bangkok, 2 hours or so, and I spent most of it with my forehead against the window, watching the country go by in the dark. Petrol stations lit up like operating theaters. Little roadside places with plastic chairs and a single fluorescent tube. Every so often a temple, gold, lit up out of nowhere in the middle of nothing, and then gone again. Power lines everywhere. Big ugly bundles of them, sagging between poles like somebody's Christmas lights they never took down. Whitey slept the whole way. He'd done it 30 times. We stayed at a place on Second Road, same one he books every year. Nothing fancy. Tiled everything, aircon unit that rattled, a fridge with 2 chong in it. First night I woke up at 4 in the morning to roosters. Roosters in the middle of a city with high-rises. Nobody ever mentions that bit. Now here's the thing I wasn't ready for, and it's a stupid thing, but it's true. In camp, I was somebody. I walked onto that floor and 4 guys watched what I did with my hands. 26 years of being the fella who knows. In Pattaya, I was a big white man in cargo shorts with a sunburn coming, and everybody on the street could see exactly one thing about me, which was that I had money and they didn't. You feel it walking down Beach Road? Tuk-tuk, sir? Suit, sir? A woman outside a bar putting her hand on your forearm before she's looked at your face. It's not aggressive, most of it. It's just relentless, and it's aimed at your wallet, and you can't be offended because they're right. That's what you are there. You're a wallet with legs and a good tan coming. Bothered me more than I let on. I didn't say anything to the lads about it, because that's not what you do. First 4 nights were the crew itinerary, and I'll be honest with you, I didn't love it. Walking street is a fairground. Neon straight up both sides, music coming out of every door, and all of it different, so it's just noise by the time it hits the middle of the road. Girls in matching outfits outside the go-go bars with the little signs, ping pong show, ping pong show. Big Dave got absolutely legless on the second night and had to be walked back to the hotel by a tuk-tuk driver and me, and the older guys. There were fellas in that hotel bar, 65, 70, who'd been coming out for 20 years and were still going at it like it's a stag do that never ended. Guy called Ronnie from Sarnia, retired CN, telling me about his 3 girlfriends in 3 different provinces like he's showing me a stamp collection. I laughed along. Course I did. That's my whole personality, laughing along. But I went to bed a couple of those nights thinking, is this what I flew 14 hours for? Watching a man from Sarnia lie about his life? Night 5, Whitey wanted soy 6. If you don't know it, it's a short street, runs off Beach Road, and it's about as subtle as a hammer. Bars down both sides, girls sitting out front on stools. The whole thing operating at maybe 2 in the afternoon, just as happily as at midnight. It's not a place you go for romance. Let's be clear about what I was doing there. I'm not going to sit here 4 years later and pretend I wandered in for the atmosphere. We ended up in one about halfway down. Blue lights, one of those bars with a pool table that nobody's ever actually played pool on. Smelled like beer and floor cleaner and that sweet stuff they burn. I was drinking Leo because Whitey said Chang gives you a headache, which I've since learned is nonsense he made up in 2003. She wasn't working the front. That's the first thing. She was sat at the end of the bar in jeans and a plain t-shirt, eating som tam out of a bag with a plastic fork, on her phone. Day off or off shift, I never got a straight answer. And Big Dave was talking at me about a boat he wanted to buy, and I was doing my nodding, and I looked down the bar, and she was pulling a face at whatever she was eating, like it was too spicy even for her. Just pulling a face at her own dinner. I don't know why that's the bit that got me, but it is. Her name was Fawn. Everybody's got a nickname there. Nobody uses the real one. 29 from Nong Khai, which is right up on the Lao border, about as far from Pattaya as you can get and still be in the country. She didn't flirt with me. I want to be really clear about this because it matters for everything that came after. She did not flirt with me. She asked me where I was from, and I said Canada, and she said everybody says Canada. And I said no, Alberta, and she said where's that? And I said it's cold, and she laughed and said how cold? And I told her -45 with the wind, and she flat out did not believe me. Made me show her a photo on my phone. I had one from the January before, the rig lit up at 6 in the morning, everything white, steam coming off the equipment, and she looked at it for a long time. Then she said, "You work there?" And I said, "Yeah, 26 years. And she said, "What do you do? What do you do?" But I want to tell you something. Nobody had asked me what I do in about 15 years. Cheryl knew what I did in the way you know your postcode. The kids knew Dad works up north. Nobody asks a 50-year-old driller about his job because they think they already know the answer. It's dirty, it's cold, it pays. So I told her. Actually told her, explained what a drill floor is, what the derrick hand does up in the monkey board, why you trip pipe, how you can tell by the sound when something's wrong before any gauge tells you. Probably talked for 20 minutes, and she kept asking, why does it break? Who fixes it? Are you scared? Somebody die? Yeah, I said. Not on my crew. But yeah, that's it. That's the hook. Not the bar, not the neon, none of it. A woman ate papaya salad and asked me follow-up questions about my job. I paid her bar fine. 600 baht, about 23 bucks. Then the next day, I just paid for the days. That's how it goes, and I knew that's how it went. And I told myself it was a holiday arrangement, which for the first 4 days it honestly was. We did nothing much. Went up to Jomtien, sat on plastic chairs and ate grilled chicken and sticky rice out of a bag. She made me try som tam and laughed at me for a solid minute. Took me on the back of a motorbike to a temple up on the hill that I couldn't find again if you paid me. She'd point at things and tell me the word and then test me an hour later, and I got them all wrong. 9 of my 14 days. Whitey clocked it and said, "Careful, mate. Said it once, in the way you say something once so you can say later that you said it." At the airport, she cried. And I sat in that terminal at Suvarnabhumi with a Burger King, and the first genuinely could not tell you whether it was real. Still can't, even now. I remember thinking, very clearly, it doesn't matter. That's what I thought. It doesn't matter if it's real. Then I flew home to a house in Timberley in November. The next 3 months, my whole life happened on a phone. Line, everybody there uses Line, not WhatsApp. And there's a 14-hour difference, so my nights in camp were her mornings. I'd finish at 12, shower, get in the bunk at 9, and she'd be waking up. Photos of her breakfast. Voice notes I couldn't understand half of. Me lying in a trailer at Curl Lake with the heater ticking, looking at a photo of somebody's noodles. I started sending money. 15,000 baht 1 week, 20 another. $700. I made more than that in a day and a half. Told myself it was nothing, and financially it was nothing. And that's exactly how these things start. Not with a big decision, with a series of amounts too small to think about. Then in December she quit the bar. Told me over a voice note like it was no big thing. Left the room, moved into a place off Soi Buakaw with a friend. Done. And that was it for me. That was the proof. Every story I'd ever heard in that galley over eggs, Ronnie from Sarnia, all of them. Every single one of those stories had a woman in it who kept working, kept the room, kept the shifts, kept 4 fellas on the go, and a schedule in her head. That was the tell. Everybody knew that was the tell. Fawn quit. 2 months in, no house, no ring, nothing promised. She just quit. I've had 4 years to look at that from every angle. And here's what I'll say. I'm not going to tell you she quit as a strategy, because I don't believe that, even now. But I will tell you I never once asked her what she was living on for the 11 weeks between quitting and me sending proper money. Never asked. Not one time. I told Cheryl in February, in the kitchen. That's the next bit, and I'd rather do it in one go. February, a Tuesday. I'd been home 4 days off a hitch, and I'd been rehearsing it in the truck for about 6 weeks. Cheryl was making that chicken thing she does with the rice. I remember because I'd told her that morning I wasn't hungry, and she made it anyway, which is a Cheryl move. She cooks at you when she knows something's up. I did it standing at the island. Told her I'd met somebody, in Thailand, that it wasn't a holiday thing, that it had been going on since October, that I wanted out. She didn't shout. I think part of me had been counting on the shouting, because shouting would have made me the guy getting shouted at, and that's a role. She just put the spoon down and stood there for a bit with her hands on the counter, and then she said, "How long?" I said, "Since October." And she said, "No. How long have you been gone?" I didn't have an answer for that. Still don't. 26 years is a lot of ground to go looking through. She made me leave that night. Not dramatic about it. She just said she wasn't sleeping in the same house, and I could take my truck and go to the Nomad Inn and figure out the rest in the morning. So I did. Packed a duffel bag like I was going on shift, $5,200 a month in mortgage-free equity, and I'm in a motel by the highway eating a rotisserie chicken from the superstore, watching the Oilers get beat. Kayla called me 2 days later. I'm not going to repeat what she said. That's hers, not for a video, but I'll tell you the last sentence, because it's the one that lives in my chest. She said, "I always knew you'd leave. I just thought you'd have the guts to do it years ago." 19 years old. And she'd already had that thought, fully formed, sitting there for who knows how long. She'd just been waiting for me to catch up to it. That was March 2020. That's the last time I heard my daughter's voice. Dylan didn't call. Dylan just stopped. I'd text, "Hey, bud, how's the season going? Hey, bud, saw the score." And it'd sit there. Delivered. Not read, then read, then nothing. 16-year-olds are very good at that. He never told me off. Never gave me the satisfaction of a fight. He just closed the door quietly, and I've been standing outside it ever since. I told myself it'd settle. That's what I said to Whitey in the truck. I said, "It'll settle. They just need time. Kids come around." 4 years is quite a lot of time, as it turns out. So, I'm in a rental in Timberley, one of those beige townhouse things by the Walmart, alone for the first time in 22 years. And my whole plan, the entire structure of what I'd just blown up my life for, was work through spring breakup, go back to Thailand in May, sort things out properly. Then the world closed. You remember what March 2020 was. Thailand shut the border. Completely. No tourists, nothing. And it stayed like that in one form or another for the better part of 2 years. So there I am. I have detonated my marriage. My kids won't speak to me. Half of Fort Mac knows because Big Dave has a mouth on him. And the woman I did it all for is 9,000 kilometers away, and I physically cannot get to her. If you want the exact moment I stopped being able to turn around, that's it. Because from that day forward, the only thing that could make any of it make sense was if the Thailand part turned out to be real. Nothing else was available to me. Every alternative interpretation of my own behavior was unbearable. I sent her money. Started properly in April 2020, 25,000 baht a month, which at the time was about 950 Canadian. But I want you to understand how that number felt to me. I was clearing 12,000 a month on rotation. 950 was less than my truck payment, less than what I used to spend on fuel and quads and beer in a month without noticing. It was, and I mean this sincerely, the cheapest thing in my life. That's the trap, and nobody tells you about it. It isn't greed that gets you. It's affordability. Every single step of what happened to me was affordable at the time I took it. And I never asked what it was for. She'd left the bar in December, right? And from December to April, she was living on something. And I never once said, hey, what happened those months? Never asked what the rent on the soy buakao place was. Never asked if her mom was getting any of it. 25 grand a month goes into a phone and disappears, and you assume it becomes noodles and electricity, and it might have. Some of it did. I know some of it did. 20 months of that. 20 months. And the relationship became, this is the part one thought hardest about. It became something I was doing by myself. Voice notes and photographs and a 14-hour time difference. I'd finish at 12, get in the bunk at Curl with the heater ticking and minus 38 outside, and she'd be waking up in the heat, sending me a picture of the market, her feet on a tiled floor, a cat that lived downstairs. I built a woman out of about 400 voice messages, most of which I only half understood, and I got very attached to what I'd built. She'd say, when you come, and I'd say soon, and that was the whole conversation, over and over, for 2 years. The divorce went through in the fall of 2020. Cheryl got a lawyer in Edmonton, I got one in Fort Mac, and honest to God, I barely fought about anything, partly out of guilt and partly because fighting requires you to look at somebody. Half the house, she kept the place. I took my half out. Then I sold the rest of it. And this is the bit where I laid the charge, if we're being technical. Sled went first. Ski-Doo Summit, 3 seasons old, 12,000. Boat and trailer, 22. 2 quads. The Denali, which I loved more than was reasonable. And then in early 21, I cashed out of the house properly and took a commuted value on part of the pension, which my financial guy at ATB told me not to do in a tone I can still hear. When the dust settled, I had roughly 205,000 Canadian sitting in one account, and a smaller pension that starts paying at 60, and that was it. That was the whole result of 26 years of frozen fingers. 205,000. Write that number down somewhere because we're going to come back to it a few times, and it gets smaller every time. I gave notice in the fall of 2021 when the borders started opening back up. Guys on the crew threw me a thing at Boston Pizza. Whitey said, careful, mate. Second time he'd said it, and again just the once, so it was on the record. And I didn't go for a visit. That's the thing. A sensible man books 3 weeks and sees how it feels on the ground after 2 years apart. I went one way. Everything I owned in 3 Rubbermaid totes and a hockey bag. Sold the truck to a fella in Anzac the day before. Landed at Suvarnabhumi in November 2021, 40 degrees, tested and stamped and hauling those totes off the belt one at a time like an idiot. And she was there, in arrivals at the barrier, with her mother's phone number written on her hand for some reason. I'm not going to lie to you and say that wasn't one of the best moments of my life. It was. I'd do a lot to have that 90 seconds again. We didn't stay in Pattaya proper. That was her idea, not mine. And I want that on the record because it's one of the things I still hold on to. She found us a place in Jomtien, up past the Soi 5N. A two-bedroom on the fourth floor of a low-rise with a mango tree in the car park, and a spirit house by the gate that somebody put a red Fanta on every morning. 18,000 baht a month, about 700 Canadian. 20 minutes from Walking Street, and it might as well have been a different country. Old Thai couples doing that slow walking exercise on the beach road at 6 in the morning. Nobody selling me a suit. And I'll tell you straight, the first year was good. Not good with an asterisk. Good. I've watched a fair few of these videos myself now, and everybody skips this part, and one thing, that's how people get hurt. They tell you the ending and not the middle, so you watch it and think, well, I'd have spotted that. You wouldn't, because the middle is a woman getting up at 5:30 to go to the market so she can make you cow tom before you're awake. And there's no red flag in that. There's no red flag in any of it. She learned my coffee in Canada over the phone from a photo. Black, no sugar, and she thought that was disgusting and made hers with about a third of a tin of condensed milk in it. She used to hold up her cup and go, "Sweet, like me." Every single morning for months. Same joke. Never got old for her. She dragged me swimming, 6 a.m., because that's the only hour before the heat sits on your chest. She taught me market Thai, how much, too expensive, no chili, and I got the tones wrong every time, and the ladies at the fresh market off Soy 5 thought I was the funniest thing that had ever happened to them. There was one older woman selling grilled chicken and sticky rice who called me by a nickname I never fully understood, but Fawn wouldn't translate and just about died laughing every time. I lost 20 pounds, slept better than I had in years. Didn't drink much, actually. That surprises people. When you're not miserable, you don't need 8 chang. And every so often, at 2 in the morning, I'd wake up and lie there listening to the motorbikes on Pattaya and think about a kitchen in Timberlake. Then I'd get up, get a glass of water, and go back to sleep. That was my whole system for dealing with it. Glass of water. Month 3, we went to Nong Khai. 12 hours on the bus. You go up through Korat and Konkan and Udon, and the country just gets flatter and drier and greener all at once. Rice paddies out both windows, water buffalo standing in the ditches like they've got nothing on. Isaan's a different Thailand than the postcards. Concrete houses, dogs asleep in the middle of the road, a temple in every village with a loudspeaker on a pole. It's poor, not desperate. Poor in the way rural Alberta's poor, where everything works but nothing's new. Their place was down a lane off the highway, north of town near the river. Concrete block, tin roof extension out the back, a proper Isaan kitchen, which is to say an outdoor one. Chickens, a dog with 3 legs called Nam. The family, let me do them properly. Her mother, Wan, 61 then. Tiny woman, hands like a bricklayer's, ran the entire household off a market stall and about 4,000 baht a month. Her father, Somchai, and this is the important one, 66, diabetic for years, sat in a plastic chair by the door most of the day. Younger brother, Beer, 26, who I clocked in about 11 seconds because I've hired 100 guys like him. Not bad, just always working an angle, always the one who's been done wrong by somebody. And 2 nieces, 10 and 13, in school uniforms doing homework at a plastic table. Fawn's older sister's kids. Sister was working in Bangkok, in a factory, and hadn't been up in 2 years. They sat me at the head of the table. Now, I'm a driller from Red Deer. I've never in my life been the most important man in a room. In camp, the tool push is the important man, and above him the company man, and I was the fella who made sure nobody died on my shift. In Cheryl's family, I was the son-in-law who worked away and missed Christmas. Nobody has ever, at any point in 52 years, seated me at the head of anything. Juan cooked for 2 days. Larb, somtam, sticky rice, some pork thing wrapped in banana leaf. Everybody drank hong thong with soda and ice, which tastes like paint thinner, and I got quite fond of it. Neighbors came by to have a look at me. They put a garland round my neck. Somchai wide me from his chair, and Fawn told me to way back but lower, and I got it wrong. And that was funny too. I've turned that weekend over 100 times. And here's the honest thing. Nobody lied to me that weekend. Every single fact was on the table. Fawn was the eldest daughter. She'd been the one holding that family up since she was 19. That's what the bar was. That's what it was for. School fees for those two kids, her father's medication, the roof they'd put on in 2016. She never hid one bit of it. She told me about it in the bar in Pattaya on the third or fourth day, before there was a single dollar in play. What I never did, not once, not in Yom Tien, not in Nong Khai, not in 20 months of voice notes, was ask what the number was. What does holding up a family cost per month in baht? I never asked, because asking would have made it a transaction, and I needed very badly for it not to be a transaction. But if you take one thing from me, take that. The question you're most reluctant to ask is the question. Somchai's foot went bad in the summer of 2022. It started as a sore that wouldn't close, and by the time they got him to the hospital in Udon, it was into the bone. 6 weeks of that, antibiotics, a debridement, back home, back in again. Then in September, they took the leg below the knee. I paid, course I paid, 480,000 baht, all in, across about 4 months. That's roughly 18,500 Canadian. Surgery, the private room because the government ward had 11 beds to a room and no aircon, the prosthetic fitting after, the transport, the ramp they had to build. And I'm going to say something that might not go down well. I don't regret that money. I've never regretted that money, not one baht of it, because I stood in a corridor in Udon Thani Hospital at 4 in the morning with a coffee out of a machine, and Fawn was asleep sitting up in a plastic chair with her head against the wall. And a nurse came out and told us it went fine. And that was the first time in my entire life that money I earned did something I could see. 26 years. It all went into mortgages and RESPs and a boat. It never once saved anybody. Juan came out of that room and she weighed me and she called me luck. Son. 52 years old and I'd have paid double. The other bit from that autumn, which I noticed and filed away and did nothing about. Beer came to me twice on his own, away from the house. Once for 120,000 baht for a truck he was going to make money with. Once for something to do with a friend's debt that I understood about 40% of. I said I'd think about it. Both times I told Fawn, because I'm not clever enough to keep secrets. And she went off like a rig hand who's had his tools stolen, absolutely furious. Went at him in Isaan for 10 minutes straight in the yard while I stood there holding a beer. Told me after, he asks you again, you tell me. You don't give him anything. This is not his money. And I thought, well, there you go. That's not a woman running a scheme on me. That's a woman protecting me from her own brother. I was so pleased with that piece of reasoning, carried it around for 2 years like a lucky coin. We got married in February 2023. Not a big do. Registered at the Amphor in Nong Khai, which is a room with a ceiling fan and a woman with a stamp and about 40 minutes of paperwork, and then a proper thing at the house with monks in the morning and the size sin string round our wrists and the whole lane turning up to eat. There was no sin sod, none. Juan waved it, sat me down through Fawn and said, you already took care of Papa. You already did more than a sin sod. Everybody in the lane heard her say it, which is the point. That's face. That's her buying the family enormous credit in front of the neighbors by refusing money in public. At the time, I thought, well, there's your proof. There's a family that isn't in it for the money. Now I think the smart thing to waive is the one payment that's a single fixed number you can walk away from. I'm not saying that's what it was. I've never been able to decide. Both things fit, and I've stopped trying to make them not fit. Here's the bit I don't talk about much. Sitting there in a white shirt at 51 with a string around my wrist, and on my side of that yard there was nobody. Not one person. Whitey didn't come. Flights were too dear. My brother in Kamloops I hadn't told. Kayla didn't know I'd got married. Dylan didn't know I'd got married. 50 or 60 people in that yard, and every single one of them was hers. Then the house. The house was always the plan, understand. It wasn't sprung on me. From about our second month in Jomtien, Fun talked about going home. She hated Pattaya, hated the noise, and honestly, so did I by then. Her mother's land up in Nong Khai had the old block house on it and about half a ri of nothing behind, and we'd build on that. 2,100,000 baht, all in. Call it 79,000 Canadian. 3 bedrooms, proper concrete, tile floors, aircon in 2 rooms, a covered sala out the back with a concrete table, steel gate, real kitchen inside for me, and the proper Isaan kitchen outside for her because nobody was sense fries plara indoors. Took about 7 months and I went out there most days and watched them work because I've been on sites my whole life and I can't help it. Half the crew was her cousins. I bought them Leo at 3 o'clock every afternoon and they thought I was a legend. I love building that house. Best 7 months of the whole 4 years. That's the truth. Now the part every one of you watching already knows, and I did too. A foreigner cannot own land in Thailand. That's it. That's the rule. No clever way around it. There are company structures and people will sell them to you, and they're rubbish. They fall over the first time anybody looks at them properly. The land was Juan's. It had been Juan's family's since before Fawn was born. So I built a 2.1 million baht house on my mother-in-law's land, and my name appeared on precisely nothing except receipts. And I did know. I want to be very clear that I wasn't ignorant. Anybody who's been in Thailand 3 weeks knows. There was a fella in Yam Tien, Ray, Yorkshireman, been out 22 years, married to a lady from Buriram. Ran into him at the Friendship supermarket. We'd have a coffee sometimes. And when I told him about the build, he put his cup down and said, "Right, before you pour a single bag of cement, get a usufruct registered at the land office. Sitakepkin, that's the Thai, registers your right to live on and use that land for 30 years or for life, goes on the back of the title deed, survives if she sells it, survives if she dies." I said, "Yeah, good idea, I'll look into it." Cost of doing that? About 1,500 baht in fees, $58. Plus a lawyer if you want one, maybe 10,000 baht all in. Never did it. And I want to explain why, properly, because he was stupid isn't the answer, and it lets everybody watching off the hook. To register a usufruct, Juan has to come with me to the land office in Nong Khai. She has to sit there in front of the clerk, and the clerk explains what's being registered, and she signs. And what that says in that room in front of that clerk, in front of her daughter is, "I think you people might rob me." That's what it says. Doesn't matter how you dress it up. In a family where I've been sat at the head of the table, where the old woman calls me son, where the whole lane came to my wedding, I'd be standing up and announcing I didn't trust them. I couldn't do it. I physically could not make my mouth do it. 26 years of keeping things smooth in a trailer with 11 other men, that's not a skill you switch off. And they've got their own version of it out there, Kreng Jai, this thing where you'd rather swallow a problem than make somebody lose face over it. 2 cultures, both of us allergic to the awkward conversation, sitting in the same house. 1,500 baht, bud, $58, and I couldn't spend it because it would have been rude. Then the truck. March 2024, a Toyota Hilux Revo, double cab, silver. 900,000 baht, 34,500 Canadian. Registered in Fawn's name because I'd have needed a work permit and a residence certificate, and it was easier, and that's what everybody does. And I'm not going to pretend somebody twisted my arm. The Hilux is the thing out there. When a family in an Isaan village has a farang, the village looks for the truck. No truck, people talk. There's a house, but there's no truck. So maybe he's not what they said. That's not manipulation. That's just how status works in a place where everybody knows everybody's business. I grew up in Red Deer. It's the same. It's just an F-350 instead. I liked being the reason they had it. There it is. That's the honest reason. I'd been the most important man in a room for 2 years, and I'd developed a taste for it. Then in the summer, the shop, 350,000 baht, about 13.5 grand, for a little roadside mini-mart on the highway side of the property. Fawn's idea, and a decent one, sell drinks, ice, snacks, phone top-ups. The local school's a kilometer up. We got a concrete slab poured. We got a steel frame and a roof. We got a sign made, actual printed sign with a Coca-Cola logo on it. Never opened. Not once. Not for one day. Every time I asked, there was a reason. Waiting on shelving. Waiting on the cousin who was going to run it. Waiting on the wholesaler in udon. I asked maybe 6 times over 8 months, and then I stopped asking. And I'd like to tell you, I stopped because I was suspicious. I stopped because asking a 7th time would have been nagging. Sat down one night in October 2024 on the sala with a Leo and did the math on my phone. Properly. First time in 3 years. Started with 205,000. Allowance from 2020 through to then, 25 a month, went up to 30 after the wedding. Call it 52,000 Canadian. Hospital in the leg, 18 and a half. House, 79. Truck, 34 and a half. Shop, 13 and a half. Wedding, the bus fares, the aircon units, the visa runs to Vientiane. The 800,000 baht I had to keep parked in Bangkok Bank for the marriage extension. My own bloody living. 65,000 and change left, of 205. I sat with that number for about 20 minutes, and then I closed the app and went to bed. Didn't tell her, didn't tell anybody. That's what I do with things. I file them somewhere and go quiet. Around that same autumn, Fawn started going to udon. Overnight, 2 or 3 times a month, 2 hours each way. Stock for the shop, she said. Wholesaler. Prices better than Nong Khai. For a shop with a slab and a sign and no shelves. I didn't say a word about it. Not one word. Songkran, April 2025. If you've never done it up country, forget the pictures of Siloam with the foam and the water cannons. In a village, it's slower. Morning at the Wat first, you pour scented water over the Buddha images. You pour it over the old people's hands. You kneel and they bless you. Juan sat in a plastic chair by the door with her hands out and Somchai next to her with his leg off and propped. And I poured the water and got it right for once. And she patted my head. That was the morning. I want you to have the morning. By 2 in the afternoon, it's the yard. Every cousin, every neighbor, kids with those big pump guns, the speakers out and Morlem going loud enough that you feel it in the concrete. Somebody's got a barrel of ice water by the gate. Grilled chicken and som tam on the table all day, and hong tong and soda going round in those short glasses with one big lump of ice, and you never get to the bottom of yours because somebody's always topping it up. I like Songkran. Genuinely. 4 of them, and I liked everyone. Beer was in the sala from about noon, and he was in a mood. Had been for a couple of months, because the Hilux, 13 months old by then, was Fawn's and Fawn didn't lend it. And Beer had had it in his head from the day it arrived that it was the family truck, and the family truck is driven by the son. That's how he saw it. He'd asked her, she'd said no, and he'd been sat on that ever since like a splinter. He'd also had about half a bottle. I sat down across from him with a beer, and I don't even remember what I said to him. Something about the heat. Nothing. And he leaned over the plastic table and said it in English. He spoke a bit of English. Worked in Bangkok for a while. He said it flat, not even cruel. Like he was telling me the score of a game. Said, you know, Fawn have Thai boyfriend Udon. I said, what? Said mechanic. In Udon. Long time. 3 years. 4 years. Everybody know. And then, and this is the bit, this is the actual bit, he waved his hand round the yard. At all of it. At Juan. At the cousins. At the 2 nieces whose school fees I'd been paying. At the whole lane of people who'd come to my wedding. Everybody know. I sat there. Bud, 26 years on a rig floor, and the one thing you learn above all else is you do not react on the floor. Something goes wrong. You don't shout, you don't panic, because 11 other men are watching your face to know how bad it is. You stay flat. You handle it after. So I stayed flat. I said, okay. I said, thanks for telling me. I finished the drink. I sat in that yard for another 2 hours with my wet shirt on and the music going and people pouring water down my back and laughing. And I laughed because that's what I do. That's my whole personality, laughing along. Went inside about 6 and lay on the bed in the aircon with my clothes still damp and looked at the ceiling. And the strange thing, I'll be honest with you because there's no point doing this otherwise. The boyfriend wasn't the worst part. Wouldn't know how that sounds. I lay there and I tried to make myself feel the thing about the mechanic in Udon, and I couldn't really get at it. It was too abstract. A man I'd never seen in a city 2 hours away. What I could feel straight away, sharp as a burn, was, everybody know. Juan called me son. Juan weighed me in a hospital corridor at 4 in the morning. Every cousin who'd built that house drinking my Leo at 3 in the afternoon. The lady up the lane who used to send fruit over. All of them. Sitting in that yard eating off my table, knowing. I'd been walked around that village for 3 years like a prize the family had won, and I'd thought I was a member of it, and I was the only person present who didn't know what the arrangement was. That's the injury, not her. That. I waited till the next morning. Everybody gone. House quiet. Fawn out on the salad with coffee and her phone. The dog asleep on the concrete. 8 in the morning and already 32 degrees. There was a rooster going somewhere behind the wall like there always is. I sat down and I said, "Is there a man in Udon?" And she looked up from the phone and she said, "Yes." That's it. No pause. She didn't even put the phone down straight away. Then she did put it down and she looked at me properly. And what was on her face was not guilt. It wasn't defiance either. It was confusion. She was confused about why I was asking. I said, 3 years. She said about that. I said, "Does your mother know?" She said, "Of course." And then she said, the thing I've been carrying around for over a year now. She said, and I'm giving you this as close to her words as I can. She said, "You never asked me to have only you. You asked me to be your wife. I am your wife." I said, "That's the same thing." She said, "No, not angry, not clever." She said it the way you'd correct somebody who's got the day of the week wrong. And then she went through it, and this is where it gets hard to tell, because none of what she said was false. She said, "I stopped working in bar for you. In 2 months, no promise, nothing. I cook for you 4 year. When Papa's sick, I sleep in the chair, and you are in the corridor with me. I never take money from your account. You send, I never take. Everything you give, I say thank you. All of it true. Every word. I've checked it in my head 1,000 times looking for the lie, and there isn't one." She said one more thing. She said, "You leave your wife. I never ask you to leave your wife," which is also true. I didn't shout. Never shouted once in the whole thing. I went and sat in the truck, her truck, in the driveway with the engine off in 40 degrees because it was the only place nobody was. Then I did the smallest, most cowardly, most me thing available. I didn't leave. I didn't confront the family. I didn't go to a lawyer. I stopped the money, just quietly. The $30,000 a month didn't go on the 1st of May. Nothing said. I wanted, and I've had time to be honest about this, I wanted to run the test without having to ask the question. Same as I've done my whole life. Set it up so the answer arrives by itself and I never have to open my mouth. 6 weeks. That's what it took. First 2 weeks, nothing. She didn't mention it. Cooked, went to market, we lived in the house like 2 people sharing an office. Week 3, she asked once gently. I said I was sorting out my banking. She nodded and let it go. And I think about that a lot. She let it go. She didn't scream, didn't demand, didn't do any of the things a con artist in a story does. She just went quiet. Week 4, the Hilux was gone 2 nights instead of 1. Week 5, she took a bag. Week 6, she didn't come back, and there was a message online that said she was staying at her friend's in Udon for a while and to please eat properly. Please eat properly. I sat in a 2.1 million baht house that I did not own, on my mother-in-law's land, with a shop out front that had a roof and a sign and never sold a single bottle of water. And the worst of it, you want the truth, here's the truth. I still don't know if she left because the money stopped or because I stopped talking to her. Because I did stop talking to her. 6 weeks of a man in a house doing nothing but watching. Both things happened at the same time. I've never been able to pull them apart. I stayed in that house 11 more days, which is 11 days longer than a sensible man would have. Then I got a room at a guest house in Nong Khai, down by the river, 600 baht a night, $23. Concrete room, hard bed, a window with a view of the Mekong and Laos on the other side of it. Stayed 3 weeks. That's my rock bottom, and I'll be honest with you, it's not much of a story. I didn't drink myself stupid, didn't go back to Pattaya and do something daft. I sat in a plastic chair outside that guest house every evening, watching the river go brown and slow, eating the same larb moo from the same place up the lane, and going to the 7-Eleven at 11 at night for toasted ham and cheese because I couldn't sleep. Twice I got Kayla's number up on the phone and pressed the button and hung up before it rang. That's it. That's rock bottom for a man who spent his whole life not making a scene. Then one went and saw a lawyer in Udon, because eventually you have to open the books. Nice enough woman, spoke good English, office above a shop. Took her about 11 minutes. The land was Juan's. Chinote title, her family since the 70s. The house is legally part of the land. Doesn't matter who paid for it. Doesn't matter that I've got a folder full of receipts with my name on them. Doesn't matter that half the province watched me build it. No usufruct registered, no lease, no nothing. I asked her what it would have cost to do it properly at the time. 1,500 baht in land office fees? Maybe 10,000 with a lawyer sat next to me. Under 400 Canadian. The truck was in Fawn's name. Gone. The shop, a concrete slab, a steel frame, and a Coca-Cola sign. She asked if I wanted to pursue anything. Said I could try, that there have been cases that it'd take 2 years and cost me more than I'd get, and I'd almost certainly lose. And I said no. And I meant it, and not out of nobility either. I just could not face standing up in a room in Nong Khai province and saying out loud that those people had robbed me, because I'm still not sure that's what happened. So, the accounting, you've been keeping track, and so have I. 205,000 Canadian in early 2021, 62,000 left in the summer of 2025, $143,000, 4 years, one house I can't visit, and one truck I can't drive. I'm in Chiang Mai now, have been since August of last year. Got a place in a low-rise off the Canal Road, 11,000 baht a month, about $420. Rented. Everything I've got is rented, and that's a decision, not a shortfall. I'm on a retirement visa, 50 plus 800,000 baht parked in the Bangkok bank account, which is 29 grand of my 62 just sitting there being a visa requirement. 90-day reports at the immigration office out past the airport. Take a book. They call your number eventually. And I work. That's the thing that surprised me most. There's a Thai drilling outfit, does water wells, and geothermal, contracts up through the north, and a fella I met through a Facebook group put me onto them. I do safety and training, part-time, properly documented, work permit and all. Maybe 45,000 baht in a good month. First time in 5 years anybody's wanted the 26 years. Not the money, the years. I stand in front of a room of Thai lads in their 20s with a translator, and I tell them why you don't put your hand there. And one of them nods. And, yeah, that's worth more than I can explain to you. Now here's the part where people in the comments are going to call me a mug, and that's fine. Thumbs down away. I still send 5,000 baht a month to Juan, $195, because her husband's leg came off and I was in that corridor, and that was real. Because she's 62 with a market stall and a man in a chair. Because whatever else that family did or didn't do to me, that old woman fed me for 4 years, and I flat refuse to go back and decide retroactively that none of it counted just because the ending was bad. That'd be the easy version. The easy version is she was a villain and they were all in on it and I was a victim. It'd feel great for about a week. Fawn and I message a few times a year. Nothing much. She sent me something at Songkran this year. I don't hate her, and I've stopped waiting to. Here's what I actually think happened, and then I'll shut up. She was an eldest daughter with a family on her back since she was 19, and I turned up. And she did the arithmetic that anybody in her position would do, and she did most of it honestly. She never once took money out of my account. She never asked me to leave my wife. She really didn't. That's just true. She stopped working in that bar with nothing promised to her. And I don't believe that was a play. She also had a life running alongside mine that everybody in that village could see, and I couldn't. And she never thought she owed me the telling, because in her head I'd never asked. Both. It's both. I've had a year to find a way to make it one or the other, and there isn't one. And the other thing, the thing that took me longest and cost the most, Fawn didn't break my marriage. I want to say that clearly because there'll be blokes watching this who need to hear it. She was the exit. I'd been half gone from that house for 15 years, sat in a garage in Timberlake with the radio on. A man who's actually in his marriage doesn't come home from a 2-week holiday already packed. I blew up a family because I couldn't have one honest conversation with my wife. Then I lost 143 grand because I couldn't have one honest conversation with my Thai wife's mother about a piece of paper that cost 1,500 baht. Same man, same flinch. Twice. Kayla's 26 now. I write on her birthday every year, short one, nothing heavy. Dylan's 23, and I know from a photo his mother's cousin still has public that he's working in Grande Prairie. They don't answer. I don't expect them to. But I stopped writing to be forgiven about a year ago and started writing so there's a record that I tried. That's a different thing, and it's easier to carry. Nobody lied to me, bud. Not once. Not really. I just kept asking questions I already knew the answers to, and calling the silence a yes. That's Murray's story, and we want to be careful here at This is Thailand, because it would be very easy to hear that and come away with the wrong lesson. The wrong lesson is that Thai families are predatory. They're not. What Murray walked into was a completely ordinary Isaan household with a completely ordinary arrangement. An eldest daughter carrying her parents, her sister's children, and the roof over all of them, because that is what eldest daughters do, and because the alternative is that nobody does. The money for the hospital was real. The amputation was real. The gratitude was real. None of that was theater. The failure in this story is a Western man who took, "She never asked me to leave my wife," and quietly filed it as permission, and then spent 4 years avoiding every difficult conversation that was available to him. With his wife, with his kids, with a lawyer, with the woman he married. So the practical part, and then we'll let you go. A usufruct, City Kepkin, registered at the land office costs about 1,500 baht and puts your right to live on that land on the back of the title deed for 30 years or for life. It survives a sale. It survives a death. If you are building a house on land you cannot own, you register it before the first bag of cement, and you accept that the conversation is going to be uncomfortable. Because a lifetime of comfortable silence is exactly what this whole story is made of. And if you take one thing away tonight, take Murray's, because it applies well beyond Thailand. If the reason you can't ask a question is that you're afraid of the answer, that is the answer. If you've lived a version of this, or you're standing at the start of one right now, tell us in the comments. Somebody watching needs to read it. Thanks for being here. Look after yourselves out there. This is Thailand.